And then there's the perceived double standard. Claims Twitch doesn't ban this kind of thing. Will ban someone for calling someone else fat or a prostitute.
That's the claim. And it also details accusations Hasan Piker allegedly made against others, calling the source a rapist, Asmongold a pedophile, and mother killer, apparently without consequence from the platform.
Then the focus shifts to Noah Samsen on YouTube.
Allegations there of promoting racism and terrorism. Claims. Samsen said the vast majority of the Israeli public supports this genocide, calling Israel a genocidal society.
And the source attacks Samsen's research methodology for that claim.
Yeah, it says he used a tiny survey, like 600 people, to generalize about 7 million Israelis. Claims this is used to imply it would be moral to exterminate almost all the Jewish population in Israel. A very heavy accusation.
And the source makes that point about YouTube's policies, suggests imagining replacing Jew with black person in those states. Claims the consequences would be immediate if that happened.
It gets more specific, too. Alleges Noah Samsen called for people to commit terrorist acts by causing damage to the supply chains and to violently attack politicians and propagandists. Even notes a specific timestamp in a live stream, 9 hours and 11 minutes, where Samsen allegedly makes hand motions supporting Houthis and says, "Free Palestine from the river to the sea."
So the source's core frustration really comes through here. It's like, if you had any opinion slightly right of Karl Marx, you could get banned for sneezing. Yet people like Hasan or Noah Samsen can violate the rules numerous times and their channels are perfectly fine. Wow. That's the...
Okay, so then we move to what the source sees as the real-world consequences of all this. Concrete examples of violence. It mentions Elias Rodriguez, who shot 2 Jewish people at the Israeli embassy, describes it as just a random murder targeting a specific group.
And Piker's response?
The source frames Piker's response as damage control, trying to suggest it was a false flag without actually saying the words. And another incident, an Egyptian person, reportedly in the U.S. illegally, throwing a Molotov cocktail into a crowd marching for Israeli hostage, injured 15 people.
Then the source talks about events in L.A. It specifically calls them the L.A. riots, not mostly peaceful protests.
Right. Describes protests outside a federal detention center, masked people, attacking reporters, quotes someone yelling at a reporter, "You fing white nationalist mother haver, this is our fing land." The source points out the irony there, demanding a reporter leave while protesting forced deportations.
And there were other acts reported by the source too, like looting.
Yeah, looting of Mexican and black-owned businesses, property damage, throwing rocks at cars, even a brick thrown from a bridge hitting a cop in the head.
And the reason for all this, according to the source?
Simply the Trump administration enforcing border policy, leading to violent actions aimed at stopping deportation raids. That's the connection it makes.
It even quotes the LA mayor, Karen Bass,
saying, according to the source, if immigration raids had not happened here, we would not have the disorder that went on last night, kind of linking the disorder to the raids.
And Hasan Piker was apparently at these riots.
Yes, the source highlights Piker's presence, blocking traffic, and apparently admitting some rioters were viewers of his channel, which leads the source to question his responsibility for what it calls these terrorist acts.
The source then makes this observation about seeing foreigners illegally crossing the border and waving their flag as they assault American citizens.
Yep.
Describes it almost like a declaration of war or a hostile invasion. Very strong language.
And it directly counters the rioters' claims, like, this was Mexico, this is our fing turf, all this is stolen. The source brings up history. California's purchase, Spanish conquest, race mixing, violence among Native American groups, basically saying, you weren't alive then, so you didn't have jack shit stolen from you? A blunt rebuttal.
Points out the perceived hypocrisy, too, protesters wanting to stay in the U.S. but waving the Mexican flag.
And it brings up that idea of children as human shields again. References to Twitter posts saying, LAPD tear gas a baby. The source's counter is that an idiot brought her child to a riot where people knew they were going to be tear gassed, and suggests maybe Child Protective Services should investigate.
This also relates to obstructing law enforcement, doesn't it? Preventing police work.
Yeah, the source claims protesters were preventing cops from doing their normal job by obstructing the police from stopping drug traffickers in Minneapolis, which apparently led to federal agencies, FBI, i.e. DEA, ATF, having to serve high-risk warrants instead.
And this feeds into a broader argument the source makes about rights.
Essentially, if you aren't legally in the U.S., then you don't have the same rights as U.S. citizens. And EO argues there's no need to have a drawn-out trial for tens of millions of illegals.
Brings up the irony again.
Yeah, leftists wanting vaccine cards but opposing ID to prove legal residence. That's the contrast it draws.
So, summing up the source's frustration, it feels like leftists ignore violence from their own side, like ignore every single Antifa riot, every BLM riot, college campus rioters, the deportation riots, and the response is always, but what about January 6th?
Exactly. The source argues that, in its view, effectively all the political violence is coming from the left. And use that analogy. Dismissing violence as happening 1% of the time is like a husband saying he only beats her 1% of the time. A pretty stark comparison.
It criticizes figures like Atriarch and Hank Green, too.
Yeah, for allegedly minimizing or even encouraging violence. Cites Hank Green supposedly saying, do your best to be as immoral and illegal about it as possible.
And it pushes back hard on the self-defense argument for things like riots.
Right. It asks, how is robbing stores self-defense? How is setting stuff on fire self-defense? Says it's just criminal behavior.
The human shields idea comes back one more time here.
Yeah, rioters hiding among peaceful protesters, making it hard for police to act without hitting nonviolent people. A tactic, the source claimed.
And finally, just the obstruction of daily life, blocking roads, stopping emergency services, cites an example of a Black woman being stopped from going to work, calls it holding her hostage.
So the source's conclusion list is pretty blunt. Argues criminals don't care about kind word, and it actually endorses what it calls a F around and find out policy. Quotes a sheriff taking a very hard line.
Like what?
Things like, if you resist lawful orders, block roads, assault deputies, throw things, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at. Extremely strong stance presented.
Wow. And on a really grim note, the source mentions the murder of Melissa Hortman, a Democrat legislator, who had voted against medical care for undocumented immigrants, observes things found in the killer's car, links to a Tim Walz appointee.
Right, and it poses this really chilling question. Do you guys really want to live in a place where people now have to be afraid of getting murdered if a vote they make ends up being unpopular? So the core call from the source is for a zero-tolerance policy on things like violent protesting and terrorism. The argument being, if you accept violence against people you hate, it'll eventually turn on people you like too.
And the source finishes this part by outlining its sort of ideal vision for America. Different sides pointing out different problems, left focuses on corporations, right on government, and then hashing out our differing perspectives. Agreeing to disagree, maybe?
But the danger, as the source puts it, is stark. When one side is throwing fists, there is no longer a conversation.
No.
And it warns, if that continues to happen, it will very much be a bad day when people on the opposing side stop being nice and start defending themselves. A dark warning.
Whoa. That was certainly an intense exploration, pulling directly from that source material. It's a perspective that definitely highlights some deep fractures and frustration felt.
Absolutely. And as you, the listener, reflect on everything we've unpacked today, all drawn from this specific viewpoint, remember, maybe here's a final thought to consider. In this really polarized society we're in, where exactly is the line between expressing dissent, which is vital, and inciting harm? And what role do individuals and the platforms they use actually play in either shaping or maybe containing the kind of radicalization we've talked about today? Something to think about.